Hi, I'm Dr. Margaret Cochran. Welcome to my podcast, The Relationship Doctor. Our focus today is on the most important relationship of all, one that's key to not only personal happiness and life satisfaction, but also to choosing romantic partners and having healthy connections with them. And that is the relationship you have with yourself. To explore this vital topic, I'm pleased and excited to have as my guest today Dr. Carla Manly, clinical psychologist, award-winning author, media personality across multiple prestigious outlets, and host of her own informative and thought-provoking podcast, Imperfect Love. Dr. Manly is that rare combination of being a kind and empathic human being and a behavioral scientist that possesses a national and international reputation for her innovative work and contributions to the field. I know after meeting her you'll want more, so I promise that later in our discussion I'll give you the information you need to find her books and access her thoughtful and informative podcast. Welcome, Dr. Manly. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us today.
It is such a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So, today's topic is about our relationship with ourself. And that, of course, is very important in terms of our relationship with other people. And one of the things that I get a lot when I'm working with folks is they'll start to talk about difficulties they're having or frustrations in relationship. And I'll bring it back to them. And they'll say, why do you keep talking about me? I want to talk about I want to talk about relationship. Can you say a few words about that?
Yes, I could probably say many words about it, but I'll try and keep it succinct. So many times in our relationships, without us knowing or meaning to do it, we get involved in not doing our inner work. We naturally, don't have a lot of self-awareness. Self-awareness is something we grow into that we really have to work on. And when we lack a lot of self-awareness, then we are at risk of projecting our issues onto other people, being defensive, getting caught up in traps that we learned maybe in childhood forward. So when we do the work on the self, which is what you're asking your clients to do, you're saying, hey, well, what about you here? Then you can really start to learn that by looking inward, that's generally where you find a lot of the freedom and the growth.
Well, one of the things I love about what you just said is that our patterns are learned, aren't they? We're not, innately born with various ideas. Things like misogyny or bigotry, those things are learned. Also, our sense of self and the way that we relate to others and how we interpret social cues, et cetera, et cetera. So I love the idea that you're saying, hey, what can be learned can be unlearned. However, as in all change, sometimes it can be a little bit of a bumpy ride, a little uncomfortable. And sometimes folks will say, well, I don't want to do that. What I want is for this other person to change. I need them to do the work. I don't want to do the work. And bringing them back to, well, actually, empathy starts at home, right? So we have to begin in that place. How do you help people get over that bumpy part where they have to recognize, okay, inner change is needed here. What do I need to do to take care of myself while I go through that?
You're bringing up such a great point, Dr. Margaret, because most of us have been there. I've been there with what you're talking about, where you're in a relationship with somebody, a family member, your partner, someone you're dating, a friend, and they have irksome habits. And if you are doing your work, which is the primary work, then you're less likely to be defensive with them, triggered by them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's such hard work because sometimes you want to scream or run out the door, or you have this urge to throw something against the wall, whatever it might be. Those behaviors aren't necessarily helpful, and sometimes they're really harmful. And so by learning that we truly cannot change other people, we can change our responses to them. We can change our willingness to interact with them in unhealthy ways. And so when we slow it down and realize that really hard work that you're talking about, hey, been there, done that, it is some of the hardest work you ever have to do, is to learn to self-regulate, to figure out what your part is in that dynamic, if any. It's not always something that you're overtly doing. And then having that internal force that allows you to stay that path and not get sucked in to the old patterns that you may have watched mom and dad do or another caregiver engage in. And when we're kiddos, we're not consciously soaking up positive or negative patterns. We are soaking up whatever is around us, just like we're watching a movie, but it's our real life. And so we don't realize how many of moms and dads, or whoever the caregiver were, or whoever they were, how their behavioral patterns, spoken, things that were spoken, things that were unspoken, how much our brains absorb that, how much our bodies absorb that.
Yes.
When we felt safe, we were relaxed. If we felt unsafe, we would have been hypervigilant, scared, not relaxed. And so you can be in a relationship with someone and they say something that to them is innocuous, really harmless. And it may unconsciously trigger something in you where you're saying, uh-oh, your body, your primitive brain's going, uh-oh, I'm not safe.
Danger.
And then you lash out. So that is, back to your point, that is why doing the self-work, so that we can, I call it following the breadcrumbs.
Yeah.
Figuring out what are the pieces here? What are the little crumbs? And then moving so that you can feel more at ease, first in your skin, in who you are, and then in your interactions with other people.
Well, you bring up, as always, a very important point here, and that is often in the work I do with people, they can't always articulate it, so sometimes I have to kind of help them tease it out, but they're afraid if they change what they know, they'll have nothing. This has been my life, right? This misery is my old friend, right? So this is what I do. And so along comes this therapist person and says, well, we need to change the skill set and da 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 da. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to me if I don't have my hypervigilance and my fear and my negative prognostication and all those wonderful, cognitive distortions / limiting beliefs? Who will I be and how will I be in relationship? So how do you help people with that fear of who will I be if I change these patterns? Not a small question, huh?
It's not a small question. And one of the things that I like to do, or naturally do, is work with imagery. And in my first book, Joy from Fear, I talk a lot about how our joy, our innate sense of joy, becomes clouded and obscured because of fears that run our lives, and how, my own journey taught me this. I did a substantial amount of qualitative and quantitative research in teasing this apart. And what I found was that, and it's not surprising, that the more we are consciously and especially unconsciously controlled by our fears, such as, who will I be if I let go of these negative patterns? Who will I be if I leave behind this abusive partner, or these abusive family dynamics, or these toxic patterns? This is all I know. It's all I have. Then we become stuck, immersed in fear. So I often use this imagery, and I say, we are all innately born with joy inside of us, just like putting a candle, you have a votive candle, and it's in this clear glass container, and that votive candle that burns brightly is your joy. So if you think about it, it's inside you. But then that candle goes into real life, you're born, and people call you names, or they don't attend to you, and you're screaming for help, or you feel like mom and dad don't love you, and soot begins to build up on this once clear votive candle, and more soot builds up. So then you have this beautiful candle, but its light is dim. And that's where misery is. The sense of misery and disconnection. And you don't realize that the real you, that joyful real you, is burning inside there all along, maybe at times just barely flickering, but it's still there. And so as we do the work to wipe off the soot that has been building up, that's why psychotherapy isn't one and done. The more that soot has built up through no fault of your own, you just didn't know there was soot there. You weren't taught how to wipe it off. And so the more that we engage in self-reflection, and again, I'll say psychotherapy, but you can do bibliotherapy, therapy using self-help books that are well written. You can do group support work. You can do, really good friendship circles, whatever. You can reach out to a mentor. Maybe you're very spiritual, religious, whatever it is that allows you to start looking at that soot in a non-judgmental, non-blaming way. Doesn't do any good to blame yourself, doesn't do any good to blame caregivers, mom and dad. Blame doesn't serve us. So when we do that work, that's when we start feeling more and more of that true self coming alive and being there. It was always there, but now it feels more real and vibrant because the soot is gone. And that work for many people, I had a fairly traumatic a very traumatic childhood and life, right? And so my work, and I'm happy to say it, proud to say it, my work with removing the soot is going to likely be a lifelong one. And for many of us, even those who didn't experience trauma, it is because life can build up soot. Stresses, pains, hurts. And so we just keep cleaning off the soot. And then, and as being, as a clinical psychologist, that is an imperative. We must, as clinicians, clean off our soot in order to serve others. So, but also I have come to see that it's a privilege to clean that soot off. It is. Oh, it is, because then you feel lighter. You feel clearer. And it's not that life doesn't bring you challenges or relationship issues. It does. It's just you learn how to manage them with more ease and you move through them.
Yeah. It's a beautiful image. Very well said. I think the tough part about the soot cleaning process, I love that. I'm going to use that. Stealing it from you. Thank you. Is that sometimes family, and most often it is family, will say, no, it's wrong to clean off the soot. Soot is what we do. You have to stay smoochy. You can't burn bright and be part of us. And that puts a person in a very, very difficult situation where, I'm starting to feel better about myself, and I'm kind of more aware of who I am and where I want to go. And then someone important to me says, no, you can't do that. How do I navigate that desire for this wonderful new feeling I'm having and demands of other people who are big time soot makers who want my candle to not burn so brightly?
Oh, Dr. Margaret, that's such an excellent point and such a huge consideration, because I think of this one card that I saw and I purchased it and framed it actually. It simply said, all things change when you do.
Yes.
And I have had that card now for 30 years because it served as a reminder to me of what you're saying. When you change, your birth family may reject you or parts of you. Your friend circle may reject you or parts of you. Maybe you need, and this is not a pain-free process. You may, but what I really have come to find, and again, using another image when I work with clients, I ask them to imagine a mobile, the kind that hangs over a baby's crib. And this isn't my my metaphor. It was given to me and I just loved it. And so you have this mobile, and think of it with birds on the mobile. And there are 5 birds. And then imagine that it's very steady. It's very steady with toxic patterns. It's steady because those toxic patterns are the known in that little mobile environment.
Predictable pain.
Predictable pain. And then one of those birds begins to change. Bird goes to psychotherapy and start moving around, and that mobile is no longer steady. And due to the principle of homeostasis, things, people want things to stay predictable, steady,
right?
They're taught to do. All of a sudden, they're trying to pull that bird back into line. They want that mobile steady. They want to be able to say and do whatever they want to do, and you are supposed to take it, so you keep things steady. And this is occurring on an unconscious level.
Yes.
And so the person in therapy or in some sort of work has to decide, do I want to stay in this pattern that's predictable and painful and doesn't serve me? Or am I willing to continue to fly, to find my wings? And maybe I leave this mobile altogether. Maybe that's ultimately what has to happen. Maybe I go find a soul family somewhere else. Maybe I go find a different group of friends or a different place to work. But for me, having been there and having helped many people through the process, once you know what's on the other side of that toxicity, of that predictable pain, you can't go back.
Yeah.
Because your soul, your mind, body, spirit start learning, no, how did I ever bear that?
Yeah.
I don't want to go back. And to me, that is what I get shivers when I think about it, because that is the reward, is when you are able to look. It's not a one and done, it's process. It's not something that takes a week and then you look behind you and go, oh, yay for me. It can take months. It can take years.
Yeah.
In my case, it took many years because those patterns were so entrenched. I grew up Catholic. I was taught to be quiet, to do what I was told, no matter what the abuse was, never to speak about it.
Be a good girl.
Be a good girl. And I was a good girl. But being that good girl was very, very bad for me.
Yeah.
And so when we look at helping others free themselves of these chains. And that's, just going back to my book, Joy from Fear, for a minute. That's why I ended up researching fear. Because I always thought I was strong and tough and I'm not driven by fear. But going back to your question, when we realize that many of our relationships, we're in them because we're bound by fear. We're afraid of leaving because no one else will love us. We're afraid of leaving that toxic family because they will harm us or take away their quote unquote love. We're afraid of not having support, or we're afraid of financial distress, whatever it might be. Once I realized all the fears that held me in some of the most toxic dynamics I've ever known, then when you realize that, it's like, oh, I can choose to move to the other side. It's going to be painful. It's going to be a lot of work. But on the other side of that jail cell that you live in is freedom.
Yes. Yeah. Well, one of the threats that's usually given in situations like that is family will say, either directly or indirectly, if you don't buy into the system, you'll have no one. No one's ever going to love you. We're the only ones. So when you go out into the world, you pick partners who tell you the same thing. If you leave me or ask me to change something or do something differently, you'll have nothing because no one will ever love you. And you get into this cycle of fear that if I stop the toxicity, if I'm the bird and I fly away from the mobile, then I'll be flying in the sky alone for the rest of my life. And I will never find true connectivity and intimacy. And in truth, I think you and I would both agree that that is where you find intimacy and connectivity, is when you get out of that, pattern. But helping people accept that they are loving and deserving of love. I think is certainly in my work, one of my greatest challenges with folks is helping them, really understand that the stories they were told were not true. You were a good girl. I was not a good girl. I was a troublemaker, and in trouble quite a bit in my family because I was always asking questions. Well, no, why did you do that? Well, that wasn't nice. I'm not supposed to notice that kind of stuff. So I got a lot of feedback about, you need to be a good girl. Be like Dr. Manly. She's a good girl. Do that, right? And so a lot of people get that kind of feedback that only this version of you is lovable. Who you really are isn't. So how do I, as a client, how do I figure out, well, which version of me is real? And can someone really love it even though I've been told over and over that they won't?
You keep making such excellent points, Dr. Margaret, and that is the work, isn't it? That is some of the really big core work, finding out who that internal self is, who that true person is. And it's interesting, I'll give you another example of my own life. I distinctly remember, and many of us can find these moments in our psyche if we slow it down. I distinctly remember when I turned from a bad, questioning little girl into the good one.
Ooh.
And it was when my parents were gone a lot. And one of my elder brothers, who was like over a decade older than me, was left in charge. And he was a ferocious figure, let's put it that way.
Mm.
And I remember standing up to him. I can't remember what the issue was, but I remember standing up and he said, "You're going to go to bed at 7 o'clock if you don't listen." And I said, "I don't care." And he continued, and then, 5 o'clock, "I don't care." 3 o'clock, "I don't care." And finally, when I wailed because he was sending me to bed without dinner at that moment, because I dared to question him.
Yeah.
And so something in my little mind, I was probably 5 years old at the time.
Yep.
Something in my little mind said, okay, that's what
survival means.
Yes. Giving in, compliance,
Yes.
being the good girl.
Yeah.
And so and that happens to all of us in some way. We are indoctrinated to learn that standing up for yourself is healthy and good and wonderful, or compliance is what is the right way to go. And so finding that person, that is how you were wired for a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, however long that was hardwired in you, those patterns are going to be stronger and deeper.
Mm-hmm.
So doing the work and having the privilege of rewiring your brain and your emotional body into finding who you are, finding what feels good.
Yes.
Finding when that inner voice says, this is, and sometimes it's just a whisper because it was, society and family, they really can clamp down on instinct, that intuition, that true you. So finding that self again can be a really long journey of learning to differentiate between the should mind. So that's one sign right there. The should mind, when it's telling you what you should do, that's the trained mind. That's not necessarily the real you. Sometimes you're doing something because you truly want to and you know it's good for you. But sometimes those shoulds, they are actually a violent way of having programmed you into doing what the other or others feel that you had best do to be compliant. And so that process of finding that true self, and it can be as simple as, if you were raised to eat every bit of food on your plate, simply slowing down to say, am I really hungry right now?
Mm-hmm.
How much of this am I truly hungry for? And if I'm not hungry, it's okay to put it away and have it as leftovers for lunch or dinner tomorrow. it's simple bits like that that you start getting in touch with what is right for you. Because often, even if caregivers didn't mean to harm us, so much harm is done when we are taught to not listen. And in our society, particularly for women, intuition, felt sense, gut, response, they're all marginalized in
Yes.
favor of listening.
Dismissed.
Oh, dismissed in favor of the rational mind, the logical mind. You shouldn't do that. That's not rational. That's not logical. When your body is screaming, but
That's
no,
what's
this
right for
isn't
me.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, uh, I have some words that I encourage people to get out of their lexicon, and they are should, must, ought, supposed to. Oh, I hate that word, supposed to. Uh, and, and people say, oh, come on. How important can a word be? Well, as you know, words create realities. They create the place that we live in and how we see ourselves. So I often have them try this little experiment when I'll say, okay, well, tell yourself you should do your laundry. Go ahead, just do it. I guarantee you will not do your laundry. Now, if you say, I need to do some laundry, replacing those words with need, want, and demand. I really need to do some laundry. You'll throw the stuff in the machine, watch a movie for a while. When the little blinker goes off, you put it in the dryer, watch some more movie, and then your laundry's done. But it's about being able to make it your own instead of something that you perceive belongs to someone else, some mystical, set of metrics that no one will tell you what they are. You just have to kind of guess all the time. So that language of shame, of some kind of mystical standard, is extremely dangerous and destructive. But we've heard it so often, many of us, that it feels very normal. And we become blind to what we need and want in favor of should, must, ought, supposed to, etc. And we become almost automatons of ourselves rather than who we genuinely are. And to that end, you mentioned neurology a few moments ago. We literally make pathways in our brain, little grooves, neural pathways. And the more we exercise a behavior or say a word or access a belief, the deeper those get, the more deeply ingrained they become. And pretty soon, as you said, there's no conscious thought. It's just bump, bump, bump. That's what you do. So being able to bring those into the world of awareness and understanding that under stress, you're more likely to fall back on those old learned behaviors and to give yourself some grace and some compassion and some patience about that, which is to your earlier point about sometimes this process takes time. We got some deep inroads in there.
Absolutely.
And to make new paths, it takes time to create those. And eventually they supersede the old ones because they become the deep ones now. And that may be a thought, but not something you're going to act on every day.
I love the way you phrase it because it really makes it so much easier to see as a process when we are gentle with ourselves, when we see that we are simply we're training the mind to think differently. Mm-hmm. We're trying to support the body in not freezing or getting defensive when a change is being made or something comes up that's triggering, and realizing that, like any skill, whether it's learning gymnastics or mountain biking or cooking something new or a new project at work, like any skill, it's going to take time. Mm-hmm. It's going to take practice, and we need patience with ourselves. Mm-hmm. Really do. And if we have a partner or family members in our life who are supportive, it makes the work that much easier. And yes, this self-work is so critical, but I just want to leapfrog for a second to how it impacts relationships. my fourth book, The Joy of Imperfect Love, I talk a lot about the relationship with yourself as being that primary one, but then shift, of course, to talking about how to create love, not perfect love. Love is always in motion. It's a process. Sometimes we're going to get it right, sometimes not so much. Sometimes it's going to feel good, sometimes it's going to feel icky. That's the imperfect nature of being human.
But it's the perfection of being imperfect. I mean, that's kind of what's perfect about it.
It's absolutely, because you're letting go of all of the musts and the shoulds, and instead seeing that if you are doing your work, and we'll take this to a romantic partnership, even though it's applicable to any relationship, and the other person is refusing to do their work.
Yes.
They are just mired in whatever their issues are, and they're refusing to do any self-work. You are going to be like the person climbing up Mount Everest with the other individual pulling you down, yanking you down. And it's you can make progress, but it's going to be really, really hard. However, if you have a partner who says, I believe in self-work too. I believe in evolving as a loving human being. I believe, and this is why I start off each chapter with a cabochon, a jewel, a polished gem. And there are these little principles that guide that chapter, because if we see that love and life, that they are journeys, that they are evolving, that we are constantly, if we engage in self-work, polishing the stone of who we are, not as necessarily just a responsibility, but as I keep saying, a privilege. I'm alive. I get this. I get to become a better person. I get to become a better mother, friend, lover of myself, lover of others, whatever it might be that you believe in. And so when we go into that process of moving with a partner, it could be a best friend, it could be a mentor, it could be family members who are also polishing who they are, it doesn't mean, again, that the relationship ever becomes perfect, but it does mean it becomes elevated. And over time, because you're each polishing who you are, you create this, what I call this third of this beautiful relationship.
Yeah.
It's getting more and more polished, not just by life, but by the synergistic energy of these two people engaging in it.
Yes.
To me, that kind of relationship is just such a joy, because it didn't happen by chance. It happened because both people said, we are going to do this work. We are going to polish ourselves and create this beautiful third entity that is also polished over time. And to me, that's one of the biggest joys of life.
Yeah, I agree. Well, to your point, we cannot change the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors of other people with our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. We can't do it. And often, if we grow up in certain kinds of families, we're taught if we stand on one leg and hold our mouths just right, we can get that other person to do, and they'll encourage us to believe that. Oh yeah, you're in charge of my feelings. If I'm mad, it's your fault. If I'm sad, it's your fault. And it's your responsibility to get me out of it, which puts a person in, a terrible situation. So if you're in a relationship with a partner and you realize, okay, I need to change some things, and he or she says, not me. I want everything to stay exactly as it is. One of the questions I get, and maybe you get this one too, is how do I know if I need to stay? How do I know if I need to go? And one of the ways I help people figure that out is by recognizing, well, you can't change their behavior, but if you don't play the game the same old way, they can't either. If you won't take the bait, if you won't respond to the cues the way you always have, something is going to change. And either the person is going to say, well, wait a minute. I'm not sure what's happening here. I need to try and catch up, or I need to ask more questions, or they become somewhat more vulnerable and engaged. That's a really good sign. If they continue to stomp their feet and say, absolutely not, I'm never going to change, this is how it is and how it's going to be, that gives you some very important information about what's my life going to look like if I stay in this relationship. So something as simple as not taking the bait can take you to a whole different place. in terms of where the relationship is. Again, we're back to bumpy territory. I mean, things, it's going to be a little uncomfortable.
Absolutely. And I like how you phrase it as simply not taking the bait, because it is a very simple concept. And it can be so hard to do.
Yes.
It can be so hard when every part of your, somebody calls you a name or criticizes you, because often our partners or family members know, consciously or unconsciously, they know what our triggers are. They
Yes.
know how to get just that right hook in there.
Often better than we do.
Often far better than
Oh,
we do.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so before we know, we're like the little fish on the line getting drawn into the battle or the pain. And so that simple act of not being hooked takes underneath the scenes so much work. And I'm thinking of that fish, we are that fish under the water, underneath that scene that's happening. And we have to see the hook. We have to see that nice little fancy worm they have attached to the hook. We have to be able to recognize it, and we have to say, I bit that before in the past. It doesn't feel good. Yeah, it looks good. It's tempting to go after it. It's tempting to try to connect with this person or prove my point, but nah, that didn't work out very well in the end. I got hooked, and that was really painful. And so when we slow it down that way, more often than not, we will swim away.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we'll take the bait because those old patterns are hard to change. But the more we find that joy, that inner of saying, oh my God, it worked. I didn't take the bait that time. I didn't take it. I walked away. I excused myself. Instead of saying something back that got me, really lambasted or criticized, I just, stayed silent. And it doesn't mean that you lose your truth.
No, you're right.
I'm not saying to lose your truth. I'm not saying to subject yourself to abuse. No, no, no. What I am saying is, if it's a situation where you're getting hooked by somebody's unkindness or negative dynamics, you simply saying to that person, I hear what you're saying, and I'm going to exit the conversation, and walking away. And if somebody is abusive with you, saying, I'm not taking this. I'm going to exit the situation. Sometimes a lot easier said than done, usually a lot easier said than done, because there are all sorts of dynamics, financial, familiar,
Yes.
otherwise.
Children.
Yes. But when you learn to start saying, I am worth more than this, I'm not doing this anymore. Doors and windows begin to open, because you're, on a really felt sense, you realize, wait, there's something on the other side of this. I don't have to be in these patterns. And again, it's not, generally doesn't happen overnight. It's a process. But the more that you don't buy in, the more you don't get hooked, the more you find that freedom of not having that gosh darn painful fish hook in your, in your jaw.
Well, and to that end, you were talking earlier about status quo and how we value that as mammals. And many times people will, working in relationship therapy or couples counseling, will talk about agreements between the two. For example, an agreement might be, okay, so if I feel myself getting triggered, if I see us, kind of spooling up and we're not really talking about problem solving, I mean, we're just bickering, I'm going to say timeout. And that's going to be our safe word, just to stop. It doesn't mean we won't come back to it and finish, and it doesn't mean I'm leaving you or abandoning you. It just means just stop until things are calmer. And the other person says, okay, I'm on board with that. We're going to do that. And then we get into a thing, right? We start, and one person says, okay, we're escalating. Let's do a timeout. So they say timeout. Let's just stop, and we'll come back when things are calmer. What? You're leaving me? You always leave me. You do this every time. Blah, 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 blah. And so they will do, and sometimes they will even push harder than before to try and get you to come back to that status quo. So there's two kinds of bait. There's not only in the moment what they're saying to you, it's no, we have to restore the relationship to the way I am comfortable instead of the direction that you want to take it. And it takes an incredible amount of courage, in my view, to be able to be consistent and stay in that place of change. We'll come back to this when things are calmer. And again, if you have a partner who eventually comes around, you're in a good place. If they weaponize that, you are not.
Absolutely. And that's why the work, although in some ways it's simple, I keep saying it's incredibly difficult, because to say something, Dr. Margaret, that you said, we'll come back to this when things are calmer. It's an elegant statement. It's a beautiful statement. It's a wise statement. Yet, if you are someone who has an insecure attachment style,
yes,
not, or even an unresolved attachment style, not for someone with a dismissive attachment style, that's fine. Come back to it never. I don't care, right? But for some people, having the strength to self-soothe, to believe that there will be a later, that it will be resolved, that they're not in danger, that they are safe, that can feel Herculean.
yes.
Because if you're anxious in a relationship, and you likely learned that somewhere in childhood, that's what, attachment style is all about. Before you were 18 months old, that was formed in you through no fault of your own. You didn't choose it. And that ability to say to yourself, I'm going to be okay. If my partner, and this is where that joint effort really comes in.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a partner and you're both able to say, hey, let's have a timeout. This is what it'll look like. Let's each go for a walk, separate directions for an hour, or rake leaves. I'm going to go for a bike ride, whatever it might be. We'll meet back here in an hour.
Yeah.
And we'll try again.
Mm-hmm.
Now if you have that level of skill, the resolution often kind of happens by itself, because both people have been apart, and when they come together, they're in a much more
regulated state.
Yes, so much more regulated and so much more present and untriggered.
Mm-hmm.
So, but if you don't have somebody who's willing to that, you have somebody who screeches off in a car or is throwing things, and all of that dysregulation, the thought, or the other person shutting down on you, all of those things can stimulate that fear that makes you just want to resolve it now. Please, 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 please. Yes. And you may say or do things that actually work against that. So that again is where that grace of continuing to work with the self, to be able to see what your triggers are, see what your owies are, see what your old patterns are, so that you can create new ones that create that regulation.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to give you a tricky question of the day, because I get this one a lot. So I'm going to share the joy. When I talk about self-love, people will often say, well, I practice self-love. I get my nails done. I go to the spa. I exercise. I eat my broccoli, blah, 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 blah. What do you want from me, therapist person? What are you asking me to do? And I'd like you to speak a little bit about what self-love is, and how we recognize when we are exercising ourselves and moving in that positive direction.
It's such a good question, and I'll try and break it down from my perspective as simply as I can. Self-love sometimes becomes a basket of everything that is about the self. Mm-hmm. And I see that there are at least 3 distinct components that get thrown in there. One is self-maintenance.
Yes.
Self-maintenance, that's the part where we maintain the body.
Mm-hmm.
We feed ourselves, good food. We exercise. We, get good sleep at night. We avoid alcohol. We take our vitamins. That is self-maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one category. We often don't talk about that as being different. Then there's self-care. And to me, in the truest sense of the word, self-care is they are often seen as scheduled ways to care for body, mind, spirit that are unique to that individual. So it could be a massage once a week. It could be time with friends. It could be downtime to read a book. But it's very personal because what is self-care to one person, like an outing with a group of girlfriends, may feel like a supreme act of self-care to one person, whereas another person, particularly an introvert, that can actually come at great cost, no matter how much they like the friends.
Right.
So that self-care, there are those boosts, scheduled boosts that we give to feed body, mind, spirit. Then there's self-love, and you can have self-maintenance and self-care without true self-love. You can schedule all of those massages and manis and petties and girl time and boy time and whatever it is and not truly love yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, self-love is the process of getting to know the self with compassion and grace. And because, as we know, we can't really love a partner if we do not know that partner.
Yes.
We might love what they look like. We might love their skills. Some people even love how much money is in their bank account. I don't know. But what it really takes to love another person is to know who they are, to see them inside. And so when we turn that same concept to the self and say, self-love is being able to see me, all the broken pieces, all the sparkly pieces, all the hurt pieces, and to see them as they are, to shore up the ones that need shoring up and work in a kintsugi sort of way. Kintsugi is that Japanese process of taking a broken pot and putting it together using gold so that it's actually in some ways far more beautiful afterward. And so I love that idea of kintsugi here. And then not judging the self, being able to see what you've been through in life and where you are going to be going or you want to go with grace and compassion and empathy. To me, that is self-love.
That kind of dovetails, I think, into something that I talk about on my outgoing voicemail message is, hello, I am a question asking machine and I want to know, who are you? What do you want? And how and when can you be reached? If you can answer these seemingly simple questions, be joyful. Most of us spend our whole lives working on them. And I think those three questions are crucial to have answered for self-love. Who am I? What do I want? Often we spend time thinking about, what does my partner want me to want? What do I want? And how and when could I be reached? How do I want to be communicated with? What feels safe to me? And how good am I at letting others know who I am, what I want, and how and when can I be reached? Which brings us to one of my favorite topics in the whole wide world. And I want to end with this one because I think it's a killer, and that is boundaries. Ta-da!
Ta-da! Boundaries.
I've often thought it would make a great superhero, like Boundary Woman or something. She have like a big bee on and a cape and all that stuff. I think boundaries are integral, absolutely necessary for having true intimacy, and I'd like to hear your thoughts about that.
Boundaries. A lot of we talk a lot about boundaries, and sometimes that concept is misused. It's often when it's misused, it's often misused in a way that allows people to believe that boundary means this is what I want, you better do it.
Mm-hmm. A demand.
A demand. And a boundary is not a demand. A boundary is, first off, if you didn't grow up with boundaries,
That's a
give
problem.
yourself grace, because if you never had boundaries, you won't know what they are. And if you've had improper boundaries used with you, then it will also be a work in progress. But boundaries are those invisible fences that we erect depending upon our personal needs in that relationship. And these fences are designed to keep us emotionally, mentally, and physically safe. So, with someone who's a very dear and trusted friend, your boundaries may be, hey, you have the key to my front door. You don't need a fence. You don't need a fence. You don't even need a lock on the door. And that is somebody who has earned your trust. So you may have almost no boundaries with that person because that person has earned your trust over 20, 30, 40 years. And you have worked through those issues. That's actually pretty rare. Many people give the key to their house, to that house of themselves, who never learned boundaries, to indiscriminate people, to
Yep.
people they never, who never earned their trust. And so that's somebody who has no boundaries.
Yeah.
And so they can give them to a stranger. They'll, tell everybody about what's going on with them or what their issues are, or they'll give their heart away to somebody
Overshare.
who's loved bombed them.
Mm-hmm.
And so that process of learning boundaries. So back to the idea of fences. Some people need just a simple white picket fence. They'll ask permission to come in the gate. The gate doesn't even need a lock. Some people, because of who they are and their upbringing, they will need that white picket fence, but with a lock on the gate. Some people will jump over that fence, so they'll need a higher fence. Some people, those really toxic people, you will need a castle wall and maybe a moat. And so to keep them out of your life.
They'll
So,
try to impale themselves on the fence and get you to
oh my,
rescue them.
yes, yes, yes. And so boundaries, sometimes they do need to be rigid. Sometimes they do need, or we want them to be permeable. Sometimes they're very flexible. But it's about learning about that relationship and what's required in that relationship. So for somebody who's really pushy with you or trying to take liberties, your boundaries will need to be stronger.
Mm-hmm.
With somebody who's very respectful and empathic and interested in knowing your needs and meeting your needs, your boundaries will be very, very flexible.
Mm-hmm.
They'll know that when you say, no, I don't want to do that, or no, that doesn't feel right, they'll respect that.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who's, really demands to have their own way and have it done the way it should be done, they tend to be so aggressive that you will then learn that you need to say no as a complete sentence.
Mm-hmm.
No explanation needed, just no.
Yes.
And that person may have a big reaction. They may get angry, but that doesn't mean that you need to relent. In fact, it often means the opposite. It means that you need to be able to take a deep breath, reset your boundary, and sometimes walk away.
No full stop. And then go practice some self-love. How about that?
Absolutely.
We've come to the end of our time. Dr. Manly, thank you so much for sharing the benefits of your wisdom and insight with us. Please let my listeners know where's the best place to get your books.
My books, there are 4 of them, and you can find them on Amazon. My publisher is Familius. The 4 books can also be found on my website. Just hit the link for any of the 4: Imperfect Love, Date Smart, Joy from Fear, and Aging Joyfully.
And where can they access your podcast, Imperfect Love?
Oh, podcast. You can access it through my website, but it's also available on all the podcast platforms, from Apple to iHeart, Spotify. It's very easy to find. And then I have my Imperfect Love Reflection and Oracle cards. Which
I was just going to ask you about those.
Thank
Those are
you.
so cool. I really would like people to know how they can get a hold of those.
Those you can find actually in Amazon or Etsy, but the link is on my website. So if you just hit that link, and they are such a lovely way to do little bits of self-work or relationship with another person or a group of people in a very low-key way that involves conversation with the self and with others.
Well, I have seen your cards, and there are a lot of cards out there, which are kind of, well, junk, to be honest with you. But these really are not. They will take you places. You can approach them on different levels. You can go in kind of a superficial way, or you can really go to a deep place and come to a place of profound understanding of yourself or your partner or the other folks that you're with. So I'm super excited about those. I hope that my listeners will take advantage of them. Until next time, I'm Dr. Margaret Cochran, the relationship doctor. And as always, there's more to discuss. I look forward to our next conversation. Thanks so much for listening. If you want to connect, whether it be for a keynote, webinar, media opportunity, or coaching, please contact me at drcochran.com.